So, are you a believer yet? I'm guessing the Wisconsin Badgers are. Michigan football now 5-0. Let's talk it up with Justin Rowe as we always do. You can catch Justin on his podcast, Blue by 90, and also at Justin Rowe 92. Justin, got to be feeling good, 5-0.
Spirits are high in Ann Arbor, that is for sure. So this one felt like, Michigan's already had a decent couple tough games. Rutgers, I would say, was a tough one to get over. Washington, although they stumbled in going into the game, this kind of felt like the first real hump that Michigan got over in their season, especially with all things considered of what has happened in the past with Michigan as an underdog and in Wisconsin or on the road in general.
People are going to complain and criticize Wisconsin and say they're a 1-3 football team. They lost to Notre Dame. They lost to Penn State. If you really look into those efforts, you would see that Michigan actually was a more decisive win over the Badgers than the other two opponents. I know 41-13 at Notre Dame, but we talked about the way that transpired in the fourth quarter. So those were tight games, and so was Michigan-Wisconsin through one half, and it looked kind of shaky going into the second half, especially since Graham Mertz kind of caught his stride. The offensive line gave him a little protection, and he threw two passes at the end of the first half that looked like 5-star passes, like they were ridiculous. And it looked like we were geared up for a great second half. And then J.J. McCarthy, they give him the series to start the second half. Boom, he hits for 56, and you guys are off and running.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much to be happy about for Michigan fans watching this football game. And I think the biggest thing is exactly what you just said, is they were able to take a punch at the end of that second or end of the first half and still come out of the locker room all geared up and really, with the foot on the gas, because in the past we've seen Michigan be okay on the road, and then they'd take a punch in the mouth. Somebody would score on them, or there'd be a turnover, and then all of a sudden Michigan's back on their heels. They can't get over it and all that stuff. This Michigan team feels different, and they were different on Saturday, where they took those punches and then rolled with it, and obviously turned the energy, as we saw at the end of the third quarter, onto their own sideline and geared it in for a win.
I basically had a Michigan checklist for this game. Like, there were all these doubts of, okay, well, they've done this through 4 weeks, but they have yet to do A, B, and C and on down the line. Okay, can they handle these situations? Number one, of course, first road game, difficult road game, notoriously difficult place to play. Check that off. Okay, the running game, they've run it down everybody's throats. Oh, they hit Rutgers in the second half, and they couldn't run it anymore. Can they run it against Wisconsin? Well, they were effective enough. They got enough in the ground game, but they weren't very effective in the ground game. I don't know that anybody's going to run the ball against Wisconsin. Notre Dame sure didn't. Nothing close to what Michigan could, and Penn State did not. So I don't know that anybody's going to run the ball, period, against Wisconsin. But the next checklist item for me was, when they can't run against Wisconsin, are they going to be able to turn to the pass? Yep. Well, 3 touchdown passes, no picks, 260 in the air for McNamara and McCarthy. So that looked good.
Yeah, I think the most praise that from this game has got to go to Josh Gaddis. I know the defense created a ton of stuff on defense for sure, but we've seen that before. This was a prove-it game for Josh Gaddis. Can you put on a game plan that is going to be able to beat a team rather than just doing having a one-stop shop, essentially, where you're only going to run the ball or only going to pass the ball? He opened it up, I thought, really well, was creative. I don't know the last time, especially under Harbaugh, that Michigan's first touchdown is on a trick play. They opened it up with a flea flicker when things weren't moving, and it seemed to spark things into place. And so everything that you just said, I thought was correct. It felt like something was different about this team on the road. And I think that this was what we were waiting to see all year. We had seen bits and pieces of, obviously we had seen the run game. We had seen them open it up a little bit with long touchdown passes, but we hadn't seen it in a full game. This was Michigan finally in a full game where they utilized all of their weapons on the offensive side and were able to cash it in for, a lot of points against what still is the top defense in the Big Ten statistically, and the top 3 defense in the country statistically.
Oh, it's a good defense. I don't care if they don't win another game the rest of the year.
Yeah.
All their problems are on the offensive side of the ball, which that's what I really couldn't determine after this game. Michigan did its job on defense. There's no question about that. Again, Wisconsin had the brief spurt of a couple explosive plays at the end of the first half. But besides that, their points were fairly meaningless late in the game. And I still think Wisconsin's got talent, and they're going to develop along the offensive line. I do think that that's probably the worst Wisconsin offensive line that I've seen. That was a bit surprising. Or, you can always go chicken and the egg. Is Michigan really that good up front? And I think that there's got to be a combination there.
Totally. I mean, I think that if you put Michigan's defensive line up against any offensive line in the Big Ten, they're going to have an advantage probably, right? With Aiden Hutchinson this may be biased, but I think he's playing like probably the best player in the country right now. He disrupts every single play in the backfield or on a pass rush or something like that. And then David Ajabo had a coming out party. I mean, 6 sacks against an offensive line from Wisconsin. That's unheard of. I think the stat was it hadn't happened in 15 seasons. So I don't care what's going on in the offense. That is pretty impressive for Michigan's defense. And I thought that the defensive backs played well as well. They were covering everything to give that defensive line time and the linebacker core time to get to the quarterback. It felt like, I don't think Graham Mertz has been comfortable all year, right? But it still felt like he was about as uncomfortable as he's been all year in that game. And obviously he left because Dax Hill was shot out of a cannon and took him out. And so I don't like to see anybody injured, obviously, but Michigan's play on the defensive side of the ball, I don't know if there is an offense outside of maybe, Ohio State that would have beat that defense or put up a ton of points on that defense as they played on Saturday.
I think they're on the schedule, so we'll get to figure that out a little bit later.
They are.
Talking Michigan football here at the Voice of College Football. Justin Rowe's on the line from Blue by 90 Podcast. Please check out his podcast right there. You can see his Twitter handle on the screen at Justin Rowe 92 for Michigan football coverage and whatever else Justin wants to talk about on Twitter.
We got a lot going on, that's for sure. I know you're a football guy, but basketball season's coming up soon too. So Michigan's supposed to be decent in that as well. But I know that Michigan fans will be focusing on this football team as long as they keep winning here in the fall.
We've got a Nebraska channel. We got a Nebraska live show as well. And those folks are very excited about their football team. They're very disgruntled, as you can imagine, but 56-7 over Northwestern, and Northwestern's they're pretty awful. They're really bad. They have cycled down, and it's one of those Northwestern years where they've cycled down and they're awful. They're probably the worst team in the conference, but that was a big win for Nebraska to just not play around with them and just stomp them into the ground. So Michigan goes to Nebraska. I'm hearing point spreads. I haven't looked it up, in the 3 to 4, 4.5 range, something like that, a little bit lower than I think most people would think on the surface. And now the challenge for this Michigan football team, because Nebraska's played pretty well. They have found ways to lose against decent teams. The most recent going to Michigan State, not giving up a first down in the second half, playing that well defensively, but still finding a way to lose. And by way of special teams gaffes, basically. And before that, it was a nice effort at Oklahoma, but they lose by a touchdown. They find ways to lose there as well. And basically, Scott Frost, I don't see where they've won a game against a quality opponent. Basically, in his tenure, they've beaten up on the very bottom of the Big Ten and then their non-conference games. So for the Michigan side of things, this is okay. We conquered a huge challenge that for the players on that roster that they had not achieved. Wisconsin on the road. That football discipline for a good team to be able to string wins together and to be able to come down from the high, get that out of your system for about 24 hours, and then refocus. Next mission, go take care of business.
Well, from what Jim Harbaugh said in his press conference and his radio show yesterday, it seems like this Michigan football team is doing just that. He said that Aiden Hutchinson, after practice yesterday, said everybody in the weight room in 10 minutes, and every single person was there within 10 minutes, and they're ready to go for a lift to get jumping there and head into this week. And then even before that, J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, and Andrell Anthony, 3 freshmen, got off the bus, went straight to the practice field and started running routes. And so it feels like this team is not satisfied with where they're at right now. And they've actually come out, so a lot of players have come out and said it in their press conferences too, saying we've done nothing. There are no banners raised yet for being 5-0. And so I think that they are taking that in stride, where they celebrated hard in that locker room. They celebrated hard on the field at the end of the third quarter in Madison. But now, that 24 or 48-hour rule, whatever you want to call it, is over. They're back to the grind. And so looking ahead to Nebraska this week, at the beginning of the season, we obviously thought that Wisconsin was going to be that really, really tough game. Nebraska was not going to be. All of a sudden, it's almost flip-flopped, where now going to Nebraska, they're hot. They've played, 3 or 4 games in a row here that they've played really well. Not all coming out with wins, as you said, but that offense is legit. And statistically, they're the second-ranked offense in the Big Ten behind Ohio State. So statistically, okay, in terms of total yardage, all right?
Fordham's on the schedule.
I'm looking at the
in this most recent game against Northwestern. When you've only played 6 games, one can they racked up like 650 yards in that game. But yeah, statistically, Nebraska is getting the job done, no doubt.
Yeah, and so I think that's we talked about the hump of going to Wisconsin and having this Michigan offense go up against the best defense. Well, now it seems like this Michigan defense is going to go up against the best offense that they've seen so far this year. And so, Adrian Martinez has been using his legs and moving the ball and doing a lot here. And at the end of that Rutgers game, we did see Michigan struggle with the read option and struggle with Noah Vedral moving his legs and utilizing his talents. And so I don't know, what Michigan plans to do if they're going to have Josh Ross spy Adrian Martinez, but it does seem like this Nebraska offense is going to be a decently tough test for this solid Michigan defense.
Yeah, I'm not a believer in Nebraska right now, and Nebraska folks can get mad at me. I'm a believer that they started to play where for basically 3 seasons, anybody decent has pretty much just bludgeoned them, that they've been competitive against those teams who just mentioned. And then last week, again, I will give them credit, not for beating Northwestern because everybody is, but that they came out, laid down the hammer and just annihilated them like a good team should. Now I got to see them beat somebody good. And they've got the game at home. And you talk about just defensive nuances. Michigan's going to have to face a legitimate option. They are implementing the option play into their attack and have run it quite a bit and quite effectively.
Yeah, it's something different. It's kind of funny. Michigan has gone against a lot of different offenses already in just 5 or 6 games now. And so, actually, obviously Mike McDonald is brand new here, but when Don Brown was here, Michigan struggled always against a mobile quarterback. They were always playing man-to-man, and then you got everybody covered except for that quarterback, and he squirts loose and all that. You never know what happens. So I'm interested to see what Mike McDonald does. I'm pretty confident in what Mike McDonald is doing right now. He is, for Michigan right now, the hire of the year through 5 games. And so I think with what he's brought from the Baltimore Ravens, probably going against Lamar Jackson in practice enough, he should know, what to do against an option team or just a mobile quarterback in general. So we'll see how that goes. But I still think, even with the stats that are showing Nebraska, even with the, what they showed on Saturday against Northwestern, I'm still going to give Michigan's defense the advantage over Nebraska's offense right now.
Good stuff. Michigan, Nebraska should be an interesting one. Wolverines a slight 3 to 4 point favorite, something in that range on the road. Night game in Lincoln. You know, Nebraska is going to be fired up, coming off a huge win against Northwestern. Anything we missed on this one?
I did have a fun stat for you that is maybe the most mind-blowing stat I've seen from a special teams perspective. Nebraska through 5 games has 6 punts for 11 yards total. Tell me how that works.
They have returned 6 punts?
No, they have punted the ball for a total of 11 yards.
How is that possible?
I saw a couple clips of 0-yard punts where they punted it 10 yards and then it bounced back. They might have had some blocked. I don't know, but this is from special teams on ESPN right now. Yeah, that's where they're at.
I'm going to take one more shot at understanding this stat. Is this net punting average? Okay, so they've had returns against them.
Their net punting average, according to ESPN right now. Hold on. Wait. Special teams. All right. Punts. All right, that is returning. Sorry.
Okay, that makes sense.
But they've returned 6 punts for a total of 11 yards, 1.8 average, 1.8 yards.
Yeah,
per
that's
punt.
still, amazingly awful. It's atrocious. Like if your punter's averaging 42 yards a punt, that means the average return is 41 yards
right
against you. The one that comes to mind is against Michigan State. They had that game, I don't want to say in the bag. There was still 3 minutes left in the game, but as I stated earlier, Michigan State didn't get a first down in the second half. They couldn't do anything. Nebraska punts with 3 minutes. One play, one punt return touchdown, and they go to overtime and they blow it. So this has been Nebraska under Scott Frost.
That's what I was just going to say is, I mean, it's just crazy how Scott Frost has seemingly, as a fan of the Detroit Lions as well, he finds ways to lose just like the Lions do. And so it's something where they've put themselves in the position to win a ball game. I mean, they're a couple plays away from being 5-1, right? Or 4-1 right now. 5-1. They
played an extra game.
Yeah, you're right. They played week 0. And so it is, I think they're a better football team than their record shows. But at the end of the day, they still have Scott Frost at the helm for this game as well. But it's just interesting what's going to happen to Nebraska or what's going to happen to Scott Frost if they end up at 6-6 here too. Nobody expected what was going to have or what has happened here under Scott Frost, but it's been underwhelming, I'd say, to say the least.
They're in one of those places where this is his 4th year, and all the periphery indications are that they have a much better football program than what they had when he took it over from Mike Riley. Strength and conditioning's been upgraded. Everybody looks so much better coming off the bus, more NFL prospects. All those periphery items that should equal winning eventually are supposed to be in place, but it hasn't resulted, on the field yet.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say, I think after a Wisconsin win, normally, obviously, we said all the things about what Michigan is doing with their players and getting ready for this game, but there still is the smell of a trap game here. You go into Lincoln at night, they're on a roll. Nebraska fans are going to be crazy out there because there's nothing else to do in October in Nebraska. And your Nebraska fans will love that one too.
Yeah. They enjoy those comments.
Yeah.
They usually come by way of like Miami or Florida State, but
yeah. But I mean, I do think in Vegas with the line, I think it's saying that as well, that it's not looking like it's going to just be an easy walk for Michigan on Saturday. That's for sure.
I do believe Nebraska's improved. I do think that that's legitimate on the field, but in terms of translating that into a record, I picked them to go 6-6 this year. Okay, they stand, of course, at 3-3. Michigan, Minnesota, Purdue, They should go 2-1. They have to go 2-1.
Purdue's not looking terrible though.
No,
Purdue's
Minnesota and Purdue
bad.
can both play like that. Lower to mid tier in the Big Ten is just a free for all. All those I expect when it's going to be Rutgers, Indiana, Maryland, Minnesota, Purdue on the field against each other. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And Nebraska may still be in that realm. It's not like they've done anything to break free of that being in that category either. Right. So Michigan, Minnesota, Purdue, then they finish with it. This isn't quite as daunting as I thought it was going to be initially for an obvious reason, but their last 3 games are Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa.
Oh,
it's going to be tough for them to find wins.
Well, for them to make a bowl game then, which I think is got to be what their goal was going into the season, is just make a bowl game, right?
Yeah.
They would have had to beat Illinois to start the year, right? I mean, that one set them off the rails for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they could be looking back at a couple of these games saying, they're 5-7, looking at the Illinois game, looking at the MSU game. It could be bad looking at the schedule and what could have been for Nebraska at the end of the year. So I don't want to get too cocky going into this game though, seriously, because I do think it's like, it could be all of a sudden they put up 30 something on Michigan's, the same way that teams have done it in the past. All of a sudden a couple big plays and you just never know. And then they got the momentum at night. It could be one of those games. I wouldn't be shocked if that happened.
I actually think their defense is better than their offense. I do think that their defense is a legitimate top 5 or so in the Big Ten. I think they're good. They're decent, more so than the offense I've been sold on.
And I think there too, what I would worry about is Josh Gaddis game planning for Wisconsin for the past 3 weeks and probably not touching the Nebraska game yet. All of a sudden he's got to get to the Nebraska game here. And he's like, crap, now what do I do? We used everything to get past that Wisconsin defense. What are we going to pull out against Nebraska now to make it interesting? So there's a lot of variables going on in this game that make it more interesting than it would be or would have looked at the beginning of the season. That's for sure.
Justin Rowe, Blue by 90 podcast. Michigan fans, we've got a Nebraska channel. If you want to check us out just for this 1 week, I get it. But we've got a Nebraska live show on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time. So check us out there. Justin, appreciate you stopping by as always.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.